My guest in the Nimataion today is Alexander Moore, and together we are spinning a yarn. Alex, you're a professional sorcerer and an educator at the Practical Occult.
Hmm.
As we said, we are colleagues. It's great to have you
We
here.
are indeed.
Alex, what has been your favorite childhood story?
Well, see, like I was telling you, as with a bunch of people, I couldn't just pick one because, I'm that guy. For me, the ones that really inspired me always had the same sort of theme. And it's the same theme that I've taken to my instruction and my career. And that's that magic is extremely real and capable of genuine, unironic miracles. The first one I always look at is Koshchei the Deathless, the Russian and Slavic in general
Yes.
sorcerer, because the key thing was not just the fact that, and I'm going to read the list here because I never remember it completely, the fact that he hid his death, a part of his soul, in a needle, which is hidden in an egg, which is hidden in a duck, which is hidden in a hair, which is hidden in a chest, which is hidden on a faraway island. But it was more than that. It was the fact that not only could he do this, but he had in many of the stories unparalleled sorceress power. I mean, he could shapeshift into anything from other people to a whirlwind to animals to all manner of things. And it wasn't simply that he could do this and he was a cool villain figure, because I always ended up liking the bad guys for the most part when I was growing up. But it was also that he was a man that did this, like a person that did this. It wasn't like Merlin in the Arthurian legends where he was essentially a Cambion, a half demon, and that gave him his power, or like Gandalf where he was like essentially an earthbound angel. This was a person
Hmm.
who decided to become this thing, who through will and relentless experimentation and effort became this powerful. And that has always inspired me as a person, which honestly leads to the second one, which was the one sentence in Bram Stoker's Dracula where Von Helsing explains that Dracula became a vampire willingly at the Scholomance, the wizard school
Hmm.
in the Carpathians, and then through hundreds of years of training and experimentation resulted in the creature he is now. Which, if you have any knowledge of traditional witchcraft at all, you can look at it and you can reverse engineer it. You can go, okay, he needs his soil because he has a pact with the land, and the land spirits give him power. And he has a pact with the wolf and the bat and the rat and all these creatures of the night that he can transform into and control. Because a proper witching pact allows control over the animals that you have. And again, as someone who is unapologetic about the fact that I'm like, no, this stuff is very real. It can really happen, and most crucially, does really happen. There are people who have pacts with animals who can control them, who can possess and move their bodies around. It is like the Olympic level of that training. You can't just do that. But the fact that it's a real thing, and I'm tired of people not saying it's a real thing, uh, is always inspirational. So when you look at for the first two, Dracula and Cochet, you see two people, exceptional people, but dudes, like just a guy who decided through force of will and through accepting I'm going to be magical as fuck to become. I don't know if you mind if I curse on your podcast.
All right.
Okay, because
No
some people
problem.
do. But they decided they were going to be as magical as they could be, as sorceress as they could be, and to leave behind mundane life
Mhm.
and be successful. I mean, you're looking at two, in the case of the first two stories I have, two largely barely mortal beings that through centuries of sorcerous experimentation became something different, became something much, much, much more remarkable than who they were. Now, of course, they're both evil, and you're not saying you should be like them in terms of like your personality or your behavior, but the suggestion that everything they do has its mundane analog and stuff that like you can do. You can make a doll of yourself, for example, give it offerings, give it power herbs, give it surround it with all kinds of powerful sigils and stuff, and make your life better and easier. Now, of course, as effective as that process is, the folkloric equivalent of don't let someone steal that doll is very real. Like you need to hide it. You need to do this. It echoes how magic really works
Hmm.
in a lot of ways. And growing up, because I was lucky to have teachers very, very young. And growing up, that echoed what I was learning, the things I was doing. And that was another example. And the third story that always inspired me that brings this round is the original Doctor Strange comics. Now, not the movie, which I'm unpopular in my opinion that I fucking hate it. But I'm not fun at movies. I'm the guy who, if there's an adaptation and they get one thing wrong, I'm the guy with his arm crossed in the back pointing that out. But my biggest beef with the movie versus the comic, Doctor Strange is a middle-aged man who's trying to heal his hands that are damaged, and he goes to Tibet, and he comes back 10 years later, an older man, but an excellent occultist, but not even the best in the world at that point. At that point, early in the comics, he's good. He's not great, but all the wild shit he can do isn't even that wild early on. It's all stuff we can do. He's excellent in astral projection. He can control the elements to a degree. He can cast various spells. But he trained for 10 years to the exclusion of all else, and he became really good. It's like everyone had that crazy friend who was like a martial arts nerd who was like, I can be Batman. I can be Batman if I just work hard enough. Doctor Strange was my Batman
Mm.
because you looked at him and you're like, I can do this. 10 years? Yeah, anybody could do this. Because even in the comics, it was made it clear he wasn't this amazing prodigy. He wasn't this like superhuman, I'm amazing at all this stuff kind of guy. And also I left Facebook open so people are messaging me. But anyway, like um but he wasn't that guy. He was just a person who was intelligent, was hardworking, but he became that thing. Now, of course, he fights other more powerful magicians, and he has to beat them usually by outsmarting them and being more clever, or in one case, hitting one of them with a car. But like, it's stuff you can do. So, and then the problem I had with the modern movie was he was there for like 6 months, comes back amazing, and that's insulting. That's insulting to not just the source material, but the point. The point that chains through all of these things that I try to tell students of mine as well is that this is a skill like any other skill. It's in my opinion the coolest and best skill ever, but it's a skill.
Mm.
You can learn it if you're diligent. All that matters, the only thing that matters is diligence and execution and a flame with inspiration. That's all that matters in this game. And if you do this and you practice and you experiment on how it works and how you could apply it, you can find a myriad of ways to, much like any other thing in life, enchant and expand, right? You know, and those kind of things always inspired me growing up because not only is it what I saw in my teachers and what I continue to see in the people who I have teach me today, because I'm a teacher who has teachers. I always am trying,
Of course.
right, to learn more. I've never loved anything as much as I love magic, and crucially, I've never been loved as much by anything as
Mm.
I am loved by magic.
Mm.
And the only way it can fall in love with you is if you show it you give a shit and you apply it. But that's the thing. You have to be able to think outside the box. You have to be like, I'll spend 10 years in Tibet. Fuck yeah. Or, I'll put a part of my soul in a doll, in an egg, in a hare, in an alligator, in a Ford pickup truck that I hid in the swamp. Like you'll do all, I'll do all these things. I'll see how far I can push it. And that's the thing. You have to be unafraid to get folkloric about it. Because some of the best occultists I know, the people I train under, and I'm fortunate enough to train under, blessed to train under every day, are people who took it literally, people who took it there, who were like, you know what? No, I am a real conjure doctor. I am a real witch. I am a real tantric practitioner. And I do this shit for real. This isn't some, you know, and because again, alongside these stories, when I was growing up, 'cause I'm 36. When I was growing up, you still had the holdovers of we can't really know, and spirits are really only part of your mind. And actually, they wrote these grimoires in code, and that was never my experience.
Mm.
My experience was I chalked the circle on the ground and I did the shit and it worked. I don't know what you do. Maybe it was a skill issue, as they say today. Love that phrase, big fan. Or, maybe you just didn't even try, or maybe you're too much of a coward. But when I was coming up, I heard that a lot and it vexed me. I mean, haunted me with rage. And reading those stories was a way to kind of be like, you know what, even if a lot of people I find don't actually do magic, don't actually have anything to speak of in this thing, I can do this. And now, thankfully, the pendulum has swung over the last, I would say, 10 to 15 years back more towards a global understanding of magic because outside of the anglophone world, not that there isn't great magic and hasn't always been great magic within the anglophone world, there absolutely has. But outside of it, you never saw this luxury of what I guess a lot of people would call the psychological model.
Oh, it's here in the German-speaking world as well.
That's
And
disappointing.
we are behind you. So it's one of my uh, great undertakings to bring this animistic viewpoint and this folkloric approach to magic back. And as you said, it's also my experience. You can learn that. I always compare it with learning a musical instrument or a foreign language or a sport. It's just something you can learn, you can do. And yeah,
See, that's surprising because you guys have the Faustian grimoires there, and those things are gnarly as hell. Like those things get shit done. You
yeah.
know what I mean? Like,
Yes, yeah, but I think there has been so much pushback where magic could only hide itself in the psychological model, um, and sometimes in the energy model and so on. And only the last maybe 5 years or so, in my experience, somehow the old ways are coming back slowly. So you're ahead of us.
well, that is staggering because I don't consider the Anglophone world to be that far along.
Mm,
Because even looking at things like the energy model, for example, going back to my boy Doctor Strange, one of the coolest things about those early comics, when he was like solving crimes, was he would astral project and solve the crime by just being able to see what others could not see. And again, it was so grounded in the fact that if you can astral project, and it's hard, anybody who says it isn't hard is lying. Anybody who says, "Oh, I just got this shit, you lied to me. Why do you lie? This is hard for all of us." But if you're that good, you could do that. I know people who practice psychometry, and I myself try to practice these same psychic abilities, who really have helped like law enforcement out find like missing people. Like it's a real thing. It's
mm,
not it as everything else has a rate of failure. But even towards the so-called energy model, I'm a big fan of like cultivation practices, psychic development programs, that kind of thing. But even that was so diminished in its worth by essentially the decades of disbelief, is what I call them
mm.
in magic, where it's like it's almost like people didn't want it to be real. They wanted so badly just to be smarter than this thing. They
Yes.
wanted so badly to feel very clever and very special. And it's funny because in an unironically petty and cruel way, and I fully grant myself this, when I have been told in the last calendar year by people I met years ago, Alex, I think you were right. And it burns me up that I think you were right. Because when I met you, I thought you were an arrogant piece of shit who was lying and pulling all this out your ass, that it was always real and spirits were real and you could see them and you could do all this stuff. And in the case of one person, he says to me, "You're now a wizard for a living, and I'm living in my car and I'm semi-homeless." And I should have been a better person about it, but I'm absolutely not. I'm categorically not. He deserves it because his magic is weak. And he didn't have to be that way. He could still be better. And if he ever sees this, you can be better and you know you can. Listen, read these stories, hear anything that inspires you to be better and train. Get a mentor or even a role model, even a fictional role model, and be like, you know what, I can do that
Mm.
and do it. Because also we live in a time where you can buy in the comfort of your own home training that surpasses so much that existed just in book form 20 years ago.
Yes, yes. The resources are there. And the inspiration was always here. And that's what you
Absolutely.
reminded us of today by telling your stories. I mean, as I heard it, what got you to this level and what got you through all the skeptics and so on is this inspiration you took from these stories.
Yeah.
The knowledge that was that sprung up in you that I can do that.
Yeah, because that was the best thing about it. And again, to reiterate, the coolest thing about these three stories in particular was that there was nothing special
Hmm.
about any of these people in terms of like their birth or their fate or their destiny or whatever. Not that I believe in determinism, I really don't. I believe magic shoves its middle finger in the eye of fate every day, and I love it for that. But the fact is, you're like, Doctor Strange was a surgeon who got his hands fucked up in an accident and then tried everything and eventually was like, maybe magic can fix me, and trained his ass off. Again, but it's one of those things, like the best thing about it too is it defeats the notion of prodigy level skill at a super young age is the only way to be. Because that's another thing our society, the world over, suffers from. This idea that your skill and your victories only matter truly when you are like young and fresh and you have them at the same time. And we know, and once you pass the age of like 30, you know that just isn't how the world works mostly. That prodigies burn out a lot, that, most people aren't even truly successful until their 40s, all that kind of stuff. Like you learn this in life. And of course, there are exceptions when you see that. Because you're like, oh, Dracula was 400 years old before he like left his home country. You know what I mean? Like, like there's always time, boys. There's always time. We got this. And, but I tell this to my students all the time because the average age of my students is 40.
Mhm.
And I'm like, we got this, boys. Like we got this. And girls, I got the ladies as well in the game. You know who you are. Love you all. But no, things like this need to be talked about too, because as cool and inspirational as figures like say Gandalf are, or like Merlin happens to be, the reality of those stories is you can't relate to them in the same way because you can't be them because they were born, or in the case of in the case of Gandalf, like a Valar, like was always there, like a truly immortal being.
Yes.
And you're like, well, I can't. Again, it's an earthbound angel. You're like, I can't be you, but I can be Cachet the Deathless. I can be Dracula. I can be Doctor Strange. Now, again, I'm not saying you should behave like the first two. They were evil. Although, in my opinion, I think Dracula did less wrong than Cachet the Deathless. He was evil, evil. Dracula was. I'm not gonna lie. He was my boy. I'd be the guy defending him in court. Be like, he had his reasons.
That hit it, yeah. Yeah.
I'd acted worse. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah.
Alex, that has been so great, so um, thoughtful and motivational. As you said, we got this.
We do. Well, I appreciate you letting me rant about something I nerd out about on a regular basis on a podcast. Appreciate you, man.
Thank you so much for being here. Great to have you, and I look forward to talk with you again.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
Bye. The world is magical.
Absolutely.